Bismillah. Sorry for the interruption, everyone. No. So as we continue, we said that what is the proper instructions to find an appropriate stepfather or stepmother? Because we do not want to make this exclusive just for the men, or as far as the men or the women looking for an ideal spouse in regards to the men, but also vice versa. Men might be looking for a specific spouse as far as with a sister to look out for his children. So it's a general affair that is concerning everyone. So now, if you look in what we were discussing, like we said, keep in mind, everyone, our focus these days is making sure, and I want everyone and myself, I also advise myself, always put your children first. Once children are involved in a situation, it's not about us anymore as adults. It's not about me. It's not about you. For number one, it's about, of course, Allah Ta'ala. That's number one. Number two, it's not about us anymore. We said it's about making sure our focus is attaining a stable environment for our children to be raised in, starting, of course, domestically, or the domestic affairs within the home. That's what we have to always aim and make our objective, our primary objective when we are looking for a spouse and children are involved. To make sure that in all cases, in all circumstances, that my child is being raised in a stable environment where there isn't misbehavior or dysfunction or screaming and hollering or being excessive in discipline, where you're hurting them or saying unacceptable speech to them, or you're abusing them, or you're breaking their bones, or sexual abuse, or mental abuse. All these affairs have to be removed from the home so we can attain a stable environment for them. These are the affairs that take precedence over everything. Like we said, when children are involved, they are given precedence before ourselves. Our children come first, and the rectification of them, because like we said, before the actual lesson was cut, oppression of someone defenseless is serious with Allah Ta'ala. Oppression of people who cannot fend for themselves, from the babies, from orphans, children's, the elderly, the oppressed, those who are in a state of faqr, of poverty. Oppression of them is on a higher level with Allah Ta'ala. Those who cannot fend for themselves, oppression of them is tremendous. So when we oppress our children by bringing them up in these unstable environments, we are committing a tremendous sin with Allah Ta'ala by affecting and harming people who are defenseless and cannot fend for themselves. When it comes to, like we said, the keynote of what we want to start, these are a couple of tips, a few tips. We're looking for potential stepfather for our children, or stepmother, for that matter. Number one, before you embark upon marriage, like we said, keep in mind the children takes precedence over yourself, because that, like we said, as our brother Abu Hassan mentioned, said, we are very selfish people. We're always looking at ourselves first. What benefits me specifically? What about the children? We are very self-serving people, selfish. We need to rid ourselves of these affairs and give precedence to what's going to bring a comfortable, stable home for them, because they are the future. So number one, like we said, talk to your children, speak to them. before you embark upon marriage. Teach them about step-parents. Ask them questions. Make them comfortable. And listen to their needs and wants. And listen to their needs and wants and fears. Because your child might say to you, Mom, I don't want to have your previous husband that used to scream at you all the time. And that he used to call you the B word. And he used to call you these words. Because it makes me want to hurt him. La ilaha illallah. These are the environments that we hear. La ilaha illallah. Mommy, I don't want to hear seeing a man putting his hands on you. I don't want that. La ilaha illallah. When I hear these stories, it strikes a nerve with Allah. Ask your child, sit them down and ask. What is your wants? What is your fears? Listening to our children's needs early on aids us in fulfilling what we can do for them. And at the same time, it also helps us to know what we need to teach them. In regards to a new spouse, you'll have a sense of what your son and daughters need as well. So you sit with them generally and tell them, ask them, what are your fears? What are your needs? Some of them will say they don't know, but you'll find that a lot of children, they do say this. Like, Mom or Dad, I don't want the screaming and the hollering in the house. Or when so-and-so parent punches the wall. I don't like that. I don't think any child likes that. Or I don't like it when any man, or I see him calling you fat and ugly. I don't like that, Mom. I don't want a man to do that to you. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. Those are affairs that we need to look in and deeply try to rectify and reevaluate. So that's number one. That's step one. Talk to your child. Sit down with them. Teach them about step parents. That's tip number one. That's tip number one. As I said, that's tip number one. For regards to that, I don't know if it's still off air or not. I have the recording here, alhamdulillah. So it needs to be uploaded later, then we'll do so. So that's tip number one. Tip number two. In regards to looking for now a stepfather for the child, before the initial sit down, be certain to ask the one who's been placed or in charge of your affairs. Ask them questions, whether they be from the wali, and we know wali is those who are in your family members, from your father, your brother, or what have you. Ask them concerning your affairs. Ask them questions. This is number two. Be certain to ask the wali the questions, certain questions. We're going to mention what they are. Or the wakil, the one who's been placed in charge of the affairs through the masajid or through the marakis or the Islamic centers or what have you. Ponder the answers and ask yourself about this man who potentially will be the stepfather. Is this who I want my son to be? Is this who I want my son to be? So that's number one. Number two. That's the second point. For verily, do you want your son to be like this individual? Because he's going to be the example being set for your child in the house of what is considered a father or a father with the true meaning of the word man. And this is what the example that would be set. And this is what the woman needs to what? Take in consideration and ask either her wali or ask her wakil. And women need to entrust their affairs, of course, to the proper men, because men can sift out certain affairs and detect certain things that maybe emotions might blind you in, or your emotions or your desires might blind you, where the men can pick up on it if he hears it and sees it. So those are another affairs. And we're not talking about the affairs or the illicit, impermissible matters. We're talking about where the wakil and the wali is present, conducting and involved. We're not talking about the illicit, impermissible relationship or affairs that take place amongst our community, where those affairs usually, in most cases, if not all cases, usually end up in turmoil. They can end up in a state of turmoil, and they become very deplorable in the end, where a lot of grief, depression, and regret and sadness set in as a result of how the affair was conducted and misappropriated before the marriage had taken place. We're not talking about those matters. We're talking about a legislated, permissible affair which was conducted properly before the marriage, where the wakil and the proper channels were involved and the people were involved in order for the outcome to be praiseworthy. So that's number 2. Sister needs to what? Ask the wakil questions. Ponder and ask yourself, like we said, is this who I want my son to be? Is this who I want my son to be? So that's number 2. Number 3, be honest about your child's emotional state. Be honest about your child's emotional state. For example, if your child is depressed because you're getting married, share this with the brother who you potentially might marry. Share this with him. Ask him, what would he consider doing to make your child comfortable? Or your child might have behavioral disorders. Make that known. How do you conduct in children who have behavioral disorders? Investigate those matters. He might not be a brother that could tolerate it. He might not be a brother that knows how to conduct in those matters and how to appropriate them and do them properly without mishandling the child due to the behavioral disorders that some children have. Those things have to also be considered. Like we said, our goal and our objective is to put them in a stable environment. Put them in a stable environment so they can have the proper upbringing. And they will be, like we said, an asset to society and not a detriment. He needs to be patient and willing to work to aid you in giving your child a quality childhood. Ask him, how does he discipline? How does he discipline his children? That's something will come up in the next point. But like we said, this is the third point that needs to be investigated. That has to be thoroughly investigated in all of its aspects. So number 3, if you want to say, which is included in that, also women need to investigate the relationship that he has with his children. Ask him, where's your children? Okay, you asked about mine. What about yours? Where's your children? Oh, I have a baby's mom, and the baby's mom, she won't allow me to see him. And, well, why not? Ask. Investigate. Why not? Well, you know how these women are. Well, that's a point. That's a question mark. Always putting the blame on someone else. Okay. So now you have a children that's 3 or 4 or 5. Did you make any attempts to try to obtain custody of them? Did you make any or exhaust all efforts? Those things have to be checked because, like we said, if he is an individual who's neglectful in the obligation of his own children or caring for his own children, there's not going to be any care for your child, especially if he's negligent of his own children. What would make you think he would care about his stepchild if he's neglected of his own children, who's from himself and from his blood or what have you? Then more than likely, like we said, if not, in most cases, he will be neglectful and not care for your own child if he doesn't care about his. This is another affair that has to be investigated. Ask him concerning these questions. It's been years. Have you made any exhausted all avenues of trying to attain them and attain your children and have a connection or have a bond with them? No, I haven't had those, I haven't had time. She had now put a restraining order. All those affairs are red flags. Restraining orders. Oh, you're not suitable for you now being involved in my personal space to be an aid towards attaining a stable environment for my child. A stable and comfortable environment if you're neglectful in these matters with your own children. So those things are also part, like we said, of the issue. Ask the brother, how does he discipline his children? That's part of part of number 3. Ask him how he disciplines them. Do you raise your voice? Do you scream and holler? Do you hit to the point where it's blood or it's closed eyes or bruises, or do you start to use vulgar speech and obscenities and profanity and all these affairs that have been prohibited in our religion? That and what the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam had said about impermissible, or how the characteristics of the mu'min are. ليس المؤمن ليس بالطعان ولا لعان ولا بذيء. As it comes in the authentic narration that the mu'min is not la'an. He's never constantly invoking curses. ليس بالطعان, excuse me. He's not always insulting people. Insults, always coming with insults. And he's cursing and invoking curses on people. And then he doesn't have what they call badha'a. Badha'a in the Arabic language, everyone needs profanity. Look it up. The word badha'a, badha'atun. Badha'a means using obscenities, using profanity. That's not from the characteristics of a mu'min. And we know so many narrations that the Prophet ﷺ, that from his mission was to perfect lofty character and prohibit its lowliness and its uncouth behavior and it being despicable. As the Prophet ﷺ said, Inna Allah yuhibbu ma'ali al-akhlaq wa yabghadu safsafaha. Verily, Allah loves lofty character and he prohibits its lowliness. So from those affairs, like we said, ya ma'ashal ikhwa al-akhawat, ask the individual, inquire about how he disciplines. What type of disciplinary measures do you take to discipline the child? Do you exceed the bounds by raising your voice, screaming and hollering? But that doesn't then necessitate that how to discipline them, for example, by just say removing the iPhone or removing the iPad when need be. And those certain affairs that they might utilize on a daily basis to remove it from them. Those are things that if we agree on it, we do it. But make sure that when the sit down, when you're investigating these matters, ask him, we need to come to a ground or a middle ground of how we're going to discipline my children. Discipline them if it gets to that level. And certain sit downs, certain people will say, I would like for us to get to know each other after the marriage, to slowly walk in gradually in the marriage before you start being around my children. And those are conditions in nikah. Shurut for nikah. And we know those conditions are acceptable within the marriage contract as long as they don't oppose the kitab and the sunnah. And a husband or a wife might make those stipulations. To say, I would like to gradually walk within the marriage after the marriage contract has been made to make sure that we're stable and compatible before you're around my children. Because, wallahi, brothers and sisters, these days, we don't know. Like we said, we have to know. We don't want to make people paranoid, but we want to take those precautionary measures to preserve our children and making sure they're not being abused in any shape, form, or fashion. So those affairs is like we said, you might want to say gradually we could come into the situation. And let's get to know each other and be acquainted. And after that, we see that we're stable, the relationship's there, then you can be around my children. Because like we said, these affairs are very sensitive. Because we're at a point in state where we're tired of our children being abused and tired of them facing all these different types of behaviors that are being shown to them that are destroying their mental and rendering them to be in a damaged state and giving them psychological issues and traumatizing them. And then, as they said, they grow up with these matters, instilling in them that it's acceptable behavior, and then they pass it on to the next individual. So ask them, like we said, ask them about their disciplinary actions, their disciplinary measures that they utilize. And if you have a son, ask him, is he willing to take him under his wing to cultivate and teach your son? Ask him that. And for wallahi, brothers and sisters, we are in a state of urgency these days, where these children they out here need a great exemplary, if you want to say, a father to come and set an exemplary example for these children that will what? Allow them to look up and be considered as a role model for them to what? Be set so they can say that my father did this for me, and he wasn't even my father, and I didn't even know he wasn't my father till later. La ilaha illallah, it's honorable. Treated me like he was his own son, and I didn't even feel it. And what will come as a result of it, because the times that we're living in, he might, when grow up, if your son grows up, he might be in a situation where he has to marry a mother with children, and he'll do the same for those children. See, look at the good that's been passed on from one thing to the next. The ongoing khair, based upon where one wanted to now seek the reward with Allah Ta'ala, where they took the initiative for that door of good, and then it was passed on for generation to generation. Ask him, ask him, are you able to take him under your wing? Cultivate him and teach my son. Be specific with your child's needs. Express that to the man. Express to him your child's needs. Because like we said, we need to establish clarity in the beginning of marriage for the benefit of the child. If we continue to follow our hearts and emotions, our kids will not attain what they need. I'll say it again, that if we continue to be blinded by our desires and our hearts and our emotions and not give it precedence, and we're addressing and making sure our kids' needs are being taken care of and they're being addressed and they're being handled and appropriated, then those are the affairs, like we said, which will be detrimental. And they'll be reprehensible if we do not, like we said, make sure those affairs are taken care of. I often hear fathers, especially stepfathers, and I've heard this story on so many occasions. I've heard stepfathers will say, listen, if I marry a sister, she has 2, 3, 4, 5 kids, I'm not willing to help with the stepchildren because that's not, at the end of the day, that's not my obligation. First, where's the father? The children could go with the father. And like I said, brothers and sisters, it's sad to say that we are in a situation, a state of urgency. A state of urgency, if you now want to say emergency, where a lot of these fathers are not taking care of their children, and they're in a state where they're not being shown a good example of a father. Or they're not being shown a good example of a mother either. So we're not going to just exempt them. So they're not being shown proper parenting, if you want to say in general. Proper parenting. Due to the pettiness or the petty affairs that take place between the spouses. Of one being vindictive and one trying to take revenge or retribution. So they use the child as ammo as an arrow. So now the child is used as a weapon for vindictive, personal vendetta between spouses, which is absolutely ridiculous. To use children as ammo in the middle in order to take revenge from someone, to use a defenseless child. And like I said in the beginning of the talk, oppressing someone defenseless is very serious. Oppressing someone who cannot fend for themselves is very serious with Allah Ta'ala. That's the reason why oppression of the needy and the indigent, the poor, is tremendous. That's why zakah, or not giving the zakah or taking care of the poor, is a tremendous sin with Allah. Why? Because they're in a state where they are somewhat not able to fend with themselves economically and taking care of their needs. So keep this in mind when you're oppressing children, you're howling and screaming and you're fighting and you're using every type of word in the book around your children. And they're witnessing this and you're damaging them. Damaging them mentally, damaging them. And you're traumatizing them. These are affairs, like we said, that has to stop immediately. And we need to give warnings to each other that if this affair happens in front of my children again, this marriage has been finalized. We need to stop this. We've reached the critical point, brothers and sisters, where this needs to stop. These type of environments that our children are being raised in has to stop now. Because you see, as a whole, it's destroyed society. Has that brought any good? But, so what we was mentioning said, often hear fathers, they'll say, you know, well, that's not my obligation. I have to take care of that child. It's not mine. Let him go with his father. What are you going to do if the sister say, well, his father's not around? Or that was before Islam. And I want my son to have an Islamic upbringing, and he's a non-Muslim. The father is not Muslim. Or, I made this a divorce, or what have you. I had a divorce, and the father is basically negligent. He's a negligent individual. So what you going to do? Oh, well, sister, I don't know what you're going to do, but, this is where it's incumbent upon a sister to be strong and not let her emotions take precedence and her desires take precedence. That's where the self, if you want to say self-esteem, for lack of better words, or the determination for the love you have for your child takes precedence. To say, well, if you don't want to be a child or father, then, brother, I don't think you're someone for me. I don't think this is going to be something acceptable. Because my child takes precedence before me, because it's not about me and this relationship anymore. It's about my child and making sure that he will receive the best upbringing. These are the affairs that women need to say in these sit-downs. And men should respect that. And that should be a turn on in the sit-down that a woman would say that. That's the turn on. Because that lets you know she's a responsible mother. And that would let you know that those are the affairs of an ideal spouse that you need to be looking for. Because that shows she's responsible and she cares about the well-being of her child. And she's not putting herself first. Rather, she's giving precedence to the well-being of that child. So these affairs are praiseworthy. And it's honorable and noble to see that a woman would say that and stand her ground and say, well, if you don't want to be a father to my child and be how the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, how he was with Zayd ibn al-Haritha, where he raised him, and also with Anas ibn Malik, where he took the initiative to do all of that. The Messenger of Allah was a father to his own children, and he was a father to other children. And take that example and take the reward of what Allah Ta'ala has set as a result of maybe being the door of attaining good. Because how many people I've heard from brothers have said that I know a couple of brothers off the top of my mind from my own personal experience. And we don't want to be like Maghamisi, who's a bid'ah, but in regards to certain affairs from what we know, I've seen that brothers that have stepped up to fulfill the duty of taking care of a stepchild, Allah always blessed them. And they're financial. And they're not even their own children. They said they stepped up to be a man, step up to the plate to say, you know what? I'm going to take care of this child like it's my own. I've always seen Allah bless them. There's never been an exception. Allah started facilitating for them provisions, sustenance, making it easy. Because they wanted to take on the duty to help someone defenseless. So Allah Ta'ala defended them. And Allah gave them and facilitated for them provisions. And He facilitated for them the means to take care of those children who are not His. These are the affairs that we are in now. This is the state of affairs that we're in now. That all of us need to take advantage of this good. Because there's no more excuses now. The children have to be now taken care of, preparing for the next generation. And brothers and sisters, we're at the last days and the days of this earth. You see it. And Allah knows best when we die, or we might live to see the Dajjal being released. What are they going to do if we're raising weak people, defenseless? not raising and preparing your mental state for what's coming. So those are the affairs that we want to now oblige upon ourselves. To say, I will step up to the plate and I'll take care of your children, no problem. Having the belief in our heart that Allah is going to provide. And not be afraid of the means that you will have to put forth in order to facilitate a comfortable, stable environment for that child who's not yours. Meanwhile, and I've heard this, and I've seen this situation with my own eyes. Put yourself in a position where the child, his own father abandoned him. His own father abandoned him. And now the new husband will come now, and he says, oh, well, I don't want to take care of that child either. And especially these affairs are being verbalized in front of them. They hear it. How would you think a child would be? Dad, my own father didn't want me. My own stepfather treat me cold. Dad, what's wrong with me? What's my sin? What did I do to have this type of treatment? Like I said, everyone, keep in mind, oppressing someone defenseless is serious. La ilaha illallah. A child says, damn, my own father's not in my life. So keep in mind, he's already been damaged because his father is out of his life. Or due to the mistake of another father where maybe he might have committed zina. It is what it is. That's the reality what's going on in a lot of our communities. So the child is born out of zina. The father's out. Oh, I don't care about him. So now the child has to be raised. He's born now. So what we going to do? So now the stepfather comes in. Well, I'm not really feeling it like that. So he might not say it verbally, but it's being exhibited in his behavior. So don't you think now that this type of conduct and behavior is affecting the child? Dad, my own father is out of my life. And every father or man that steps up and my mother marries, he treats me so cold. What did I do? What was my sin? What did I do to deserve this? La ilaha illallah. And then you wonder why these detriments to society runs rampant on the streets. Because they've been broken. Broken by adults that don't want to be adults or step up to the plate to make a stable environment for the child. It's heartbreaking. So these affairs, like we said, this is what we need to acknowledge, and this is what we need to address and make it our primary focus. So, like we said, how heartbreaking is it to know that your mom is loving a man who doesn't want to feed you? That's another thing. How heartbreaking is it to know your mom is in love with a man who doesn't want to feed you? So your son is sitting there. My mom is in love with this man. He treats me so cold. La ilaha illallah. This is, like we said, brothers and sisters, this type of behavior cannot be tolerated. The children come first. It's not about you anymore. It's not about I'm love, I'm chasing love, I need love. No. My self-respect for myself and for my child comes first. So what we're going to do is rectify and making sure his situation is comfortable and he's receiving the best upbringing. That's what we need to know. But you'll find there's adults out here, they don't care about how their child is being treated in their home. And they're just building a monster. And then when the child is broken mentally and he wants to rebel and become a detriment to society, then everyone is in an uproar. Oh, subhanAllah, these children. But if you really investigate what happened, usually in most cases there was a discrepancy in the upbringing somewhere where he was not being properly reared and cultivated. Where he did not receive that love, and something went left in that regard. And as a result of it, he became a detriment against society. This is where the disrespect begins in reference to a young boy. In reference to a young boy and his stepdad. It starts in these places. And it also will pass on another type of dysfunctional behavior, which is your daughter will look for these type of affairs in a man. And they'll be taught like, oh, this is what I have looked forward to. This is how men treat women. This is their treatment. So one of two things usually happen in these cases. Usually women look for a man like that with this type of dysfunctional behavior, or the opposite takes place where they don't even want to practice Islam no more. Because in their mind, I don't have no hope for me. This is how these men treat women. Well, it's no hope for me. Well, I might as well go the opposite direction. La ilaha illallah. Let's be clear, and let's let, as they say, bygones be bygones. No doubt, Islamically, a man does not have to financially provide for the wife's child. Nobody's saying that. Doesn't have to do that. However, why wouldn't you want to seek the reward with Allah Ta'ala? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, سابقوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض. Hasten towards those righteous actions. Hasten towards what will help you, be a means to you to attain the gardens whose distance of the heavens and the earth. Prepare for those who believe and prepare for those who have taqwa. The initiative and the door is open. However, a lot of us don't want to walk through it because of our fear of poverty, or our fear that our provisions will be restricted because I have to take care of this child who's not mine. You'll find that a lot of men have this type of fear, or they say, oh, I don't feel like it. I don't really feel like, take care of these children. Brothers and sisters, look what's going on around you. Everybody keeps saying the same thing. Everywhere I go, I listen to conversations with brothers, conversations with concerns. All of it's the same thing, man. These children, man, they just wild out here. They just shooting and killing them. This is what we're discussing here is the problem. This is where it stems from. Unstable homes, not being reared properly, them not having and perceiving the proper love, the proper discipline, knowing how to be properly disciplined, and knowing how to not be off, and also at the same time not to be also too much pardoning where they need to be disciplined. All those affairs were misappropriated, and as a result of it, they became a detriment to society. Because I hear it everywhere. Everybody discusses the same issues. These men out here, these lifestyles, these people out here, everybody's up in an uproar. Everybody's uptight. Everybody's is just in a state of disarray in regards to their affairs being disproportionated, and everything's been separated. And everything to the end of it, it's like, brothers and sisters, tell you, well, we have to now look for the solutions and acknowledge them, and be frank and saying what is for us or against us. So we can start now rectifying the issue and starting to make those stepping stones towards trying to stop it, so we can attain our reward with Allah Ta'ala. So also in regards to that, so that is something that we said is a concern. However, brothers and sisters, so these are the affairs, like we said, in regards to what has to be addressed, the rewards of looking forward that a one has to aim towards, like we said, if he wants to attain that reward with Allah by raising someone who's not your child. For that sadaqah that Allah Ta'ala will bless you immensely by taking on that tremendous noble responsibility. Why wouldn't you want to keep a young youth off the streets and aid him and teach him and have him with you? And then Allah will start to instill love and bring togetherness to your hearts. So you have now been a protector and a provider and removed the burden from another believer. This is from our religion. من فرج عن مؤمن كربة من كرب الدنيا فرج الله عنه كربة من كرب يوم القيامة. Whoever removes a burden from the burdens of this dunya, Allah Ta'ala will remove the burden from the burdens of the day of resurrection. Look to our beautiful religion, how beautiful it is. La ilaha illallah. Why, when you want to keep a young youth off the streets, keep them in the masajid, teaching them lofty character and exemplary character. Now for the second part, so we could come to an end. You've done your homework and you found a respectful brother who's willing to help you with your son and with your children. Now, this is the other issue. Now, this might return back to our sisters. However, when this brother shows sternness meaning punishment. We're not talking about abuse or use of obscene language and exhibiting dysfunctional behavior and exceeding the bounds and beating and punching. And we're not talking about that. That's not what we're going with it. That we already established, that's clearly unacceptable. That's what we've been aiming towards ridding our homes of, this type of behavior. So let's make it clear. I don't mean abuse. I'm referring to perhaps, for example, no iPad or no allowance or what have you. So the man wants to now put forth these disciplinary actions to try to rectify the child because he's not doing what he or she is supposed to do. So what does he do? Now the mom comes in. She's upset because the brother, what did he do? Created a boundary. Now she is saying, you have no right to discipline my child. Here comes the confusion. Now the confusion sets in. So the child is witnessing this. Oh, my mom did my stepfather said one thing, but my mom is she's rejecting his boundary, or the boundary that's been set for it with means of discipline. This is now where we have to advise our sisters. For number one, we want to establish, we've always mentioned this, but do we clearly apply these narrations of our Prophet ﷺ in al-mu'minun كالبنيان يشد بعضهم بعضا, or مثل المؤمنين في تعاطفهم وتراحمهم في توادهم وتعاطفهم وتراحمهم كمثل الجسد الواحد فإذا اشتكى منه عضو تداعى له سائر الجسد بالسهر والحمى. All those narrations. Prophet ﷺ very much said, مثل المؤمنين في توادهم وتراحمهم وتعاطفهم كمثل الجسد الواحد. He said that the mu'min, that the similarity of them is like the similarity of one body. If one part of the body or the organ becomes sick, then the rest, as we know, complains from that suffering and that weariness. The rest of the body suffers likewise. So this is what we would have been establishing. These narrations we've been rereading, and we hear it all the time. But do we truly apply them? That's the question we need to ask ourselves, especially in regards to our upbringing of the stepchildren and what's going to be a means for their rectification. So, sister, now, what's incumbent upon you? This man has now made a disciplinary action. Like we said, these affairs need to be agreed upon in regards to the child. So, we said that the Muslims are one body, and the reminder benefits the believer. So the moment you became upset to teach your child to only respect you, most times they stop respecting you. Why? Meaning the mother. Because it became deeper. Why? You always pacified his responsibilities and those healthy boundaries that was set. So that's a problem on the mother now. You taught him that he had an opinion in reference to disobeying Allah, or in reference to obeying Allah and His Messenger. Oh, you have an open opinion. That's a problem. Major problem. That's a discrepancy in his upbringing. Major discrepancy. We often see this in our community. When we try to teach our boys, the moms are too lenient. So then we're now being tactful in addressing that issue. Too lenient. So the mother smother them with love and stunt their growth by robbing them of the ability to spring forward and problem solve, because that's a major part of life that a lot of us are weakening our children in, giving them the ability to be able to think for themselves and solve problems on their own without their parents doing the thinking for them. Because that can be a major discrepancy in embarking upon life when they have to go out here in the belly of the beast in this environment. Because eventually you're going to have to let your children go, and they're going to have to go out in the world. You cannot be there for them all the time. They're going to have to come to a point in their life, they have to make their own decisions. You'll find this is also widespread amongst our people. You'll find that the children can't think for themselves because their mother was doing the thinking for them, or the parent was doing the thinking for them. So this can create low self-esteem in our boys and in our children. Affirm talking from a brother at the masjid is, and I want to hear this, and as I'm saying this to address our sisters, affirm, assertive talk or conversation with a brother at the masjid is better than a guard upstate in correctional facilities checking his private parts after a visit. That is a reality. So how you want to have it? Last, we have the sisters that ran into they experienced bad relationships. This is another thing that we want to address for our sisters. They dislike the boy's father, meaning from the previous relationship. So you know what they'll do. They'll take their anger and their wrath out on the child, on the son. Punish his son because they hate for the father. Lashing with their tongue, saying everything you can to humiliate him. To humiliate and make him feel it. Like we said, what did we say in the beginning part of the lesson? Depression of someone defenseless is serious and tremendous with Allah Ta'ala. Calling him out his name. Not offering him emotional support because you want him to be a man. Reality is, he's a boy. You've been entrusted to take care of him. You've been entrusted. All of us need to say, and this is a statement that we all need to adopt. It takes a village to raise children that we have left off. It's not just parents in the home. It's everyone. Everyone in the city, everyone in the neighborhood, everyone in the whole world. Reality is a boy is in your care, in our care. And your child that's 8 years old or 5 years old, he doesn't have to hold you down. That's not his responsibility. He's a child. The trauma creates a lack of compassion and communication skills in our men. And I've heard this complaint from a lot of our sisters. Doesn't know how to communicate. Doesn't know how to communicate in a functional manner, in an efficient, respectable manner. Doesn't know how to communicate. Sisters, usually what happened to the brother, this usually happened because of the brother that let you down in the previous relationship. So, sister, your role is essential. Your role is essential to your son's growth. Your actions teach him how to love. You teach him, instill him communication skills and what to expect from women and what to look for in a woman, an ideal woman. Despite your hurt, what you've experienced, raise your sons, of course, the best way you can. And our brother Rashid Barbie today gave a tremendous beneficial lecture and great Salafi scholars that were raised by their mothers, which could be an incentive for those women, for those who became from the greatest of this ummah, who are the leaders of this ummah, that were cultivated by mothers without the fathers, if the case may be. Allah doesn't give a soul beyond its scope or beyond its capacity. So be patient and seek Allah Ta'ala's reward and pleasure. Paradise is at your feet, sisters. And don't let a sour relationship or a sinful brother or a mentally disturbed brother destroy your family and destroy your self-esteem and destroy your mental and render you twisted. Rather, do not think that there are brothers out here that don't know your situation. We know the games these brothers play. We know them very well. They're not hidden from us. They're not hidden first from our Lord. Then those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instilled insight from the people of knowledge and from the students who hear the cries and the pain of the people, it's not hidden from us. We know what's going on. We know the mental games and the mental state and what's going on. And may Allah Ta'ala protect all of us and you from these affairs. So because every soul shall answer for their sins and to the oppression of defenseless children and the torture, mental torture that we have done to these children. And may Allah Ta'ala make us better. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.